We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity, we make up for in film study. And each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane page. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. And I'm joined by BGN's own film guru, Jonny Page. Give him a follow on Twitter at JohnnyPage9. Jonny, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. It feels like a bit of a whirlwind post-draft. I'm trying to catch up on watching players at the same time. I think I managed to watch, I was trying to look before, about 4 of the prospects that the Eagles picked, and I really hoped I watched more. But it's always the way. Ty Robinson was actually the very last guy on my defensive tackle list, and I was like, nah, I can skip one. And then, of course, they pick him, so I was sort of mad. But yeah, I'm looking forward to today. We never really spoke, actually, on there. I was saying to Shane before. Normally with our guests, I've been back and forth, but I must admit, Devin, we've never really spoken very much. The occasional tweet back and forth. But so yeah, to set up our guest today, Devin from the Philly Inquirer. So I've never told you this either, but whenever I write for Bleeding Green and I do my draft write-ups, I'm constantly searching Twitter for clips to use to back up film points I've used, especially because Twitter can be quite funny with All-22 and sharing college film. And every time I search for anyone, Devin, your name just pops up. So I feel like you've got like a film clip factory. Whenever I can't go anywhere, I just type in your name and find a player, and there'll always be a clip to plug. I think actually the last time I messaged you was last year. And I'm pretty sure I asked you, do you mind if I chuck some of your tweets in the BGN articles, because you've got so many good ones. So yeah, I think you're one of the big names in the Eagles draft world, because I think you're very lucky that you get to cover it, but you also seem to have a lot of knowledge about a ton of players. So apologies for making you record nice and early, being from the UK, but how are you doing? I was going to say, how was your evening? But I guess it's afternoon for you guys still.
Yeah. You guys did the intro and said evening. I was like, man, it's an afternoon here. But yeah, I'm doing great. It's awesome to join you guys. You know, I follow, I think, both of you, I think individually for maybe a year or two, and seeing all the work that you guys do, breaking down the Eagles and, having those film recaps and staying on top of everything Eagles related, especially in the film room. It's been awesome to watch. And, same thing with the draft process. So it's really an honor to be on with you guys and talk through this Eagles class.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on to chat with us. And you guys be sure you're following Devin on Twitter at RealD_Jackson. Like Jonny said, he puts out a lot of great draft stuff. He's got clips and stuff up on these players already. Jonny's probably in the process. I just refuse. It's like, nope, I am not recording clips and putting them out. I'll talk about these guys. I am filmed out until the NFL season starts. But regardless, we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about some of these guys. And I think we want to just start off with some overall draft takeaways, and then we can get into the individual players. And so the Eagles entered the draft with 8 selections. They ended up making 10 picks through multiple trade backs. They gained a 5th round pick next year. I actually plugged all of their trades put together into a trade calculator, and basically they ended up with somewhere around a 6th round pick in excess value from all the trades. So much ado about nothing with all the trades. I saw that MathBomb on Twitter put out his top draft classes by relative athletic score, and the NFC East was apparently very interested in athleticism this year. The Eagles always are, and this was no exception. They had the 4th most athletic draft class per relative athletic scores. But the Commanders were number 1 and the Giants were number 3. So 3 of the top 4 came from the division. And then the Cowboys drafted, I think, the only sub 5.0 relative athletic score guy in the first round. So opposite ends of the spectrum there. I saw on Twitter, maybe, a lot of people dislike draft grades. I think there's some value in it, but off of consensus draft grades out of 24 outlets compiled together, the Eagles were ranked with the 5th best draft class. So another seemingly good draft for the Eagles. In the last 4 years, a lot of times the draft just tells you what teams want to focus on. And in the last 4 years, the Eagles have spent all 5 of their first round selections on the defense. They have spent 2 of 3 second round picks on the defense and 3 of 4 third round picks on the defense. So overall, 10 out of 12 day 1 and 2 picks on the defense over the last 4 years. And so that was something that stood out to me. But Devin, I'll throw it to you. Before we get into the individual players, is there anything big picture you took away from the Eagles draft?
Yeah, I think with the Eagles, I think, they always want to find value. And again, you saw it with Jahad Campbell in the first round going at 31. And it was just kind of interesting to watch Campbell and see like where exactly he was going to land, because it felt like coming out of the combine, he was pretty sure he's going to be like a top 10, top 15 pick. And then the shoulder stuff started coming out, and maybe he has some knee issues as well. So all those things combined, made him available at the end of round 1. But it surely seemed Tampa wasn't going to pass on them, but they did, So that was one of my first takeaways. But I think overall, I think I was a little surprised that the Eagles didn't address offensive line or defensive line, like the interior defensive line and then interior offensive line until day 3. I thought that was going to be one of those positions that at least, one of the first 3 picks in the first 3 rounds, that they were going to go, one of those spots. So I was a little surprised that they elected not to. Obviously, in the 4th round, they took Ty Robinson, but they took 2 6th-round offensive linemen. So I think those were a few takeaways. Was they got some really good players in Jahad Campbell and Andrew McCougar with their first 2 picks. Obviously, traded back a few times in round 3 and just traded out of round 3 altogether. So that's what I would say is that when in the draft, it seems like they typically target offensive line and interior defensive line earlier in drafts than they did, but those are kind of my main takeaways. And you got to be excited, some of those 6th-round offensive linemen, because they were guys that, at least Cam Williams wise, and we get more into him a little bit later, but a guy that was getting, early round buzz into the summer and even earlier in the season last fall. So I think overall, it was a class that they definitely took some swings with, but also I think they got some contributors, especially on day 3, when you look at Ty Robinson and, some down the line contributors if Cam Williams or Miles Hinton end up turning out to be good players.
All right. Jonny, anything you want to add on to that big picture before we start getting into the individual players?
Yeah, nothing major, to be honest. I think I was frustrated live. I think a lot of people were with the trade downs. I think it felt like how he got sniped a few times. Like it felt like he had someone he wanted and then someone went and he ended up dropping down. And I'm not really into conspiracy theories or anything, but I do wonder if GMs are a bit suspicious of Howie when he's trying to come up with someone these days. Normally you see Howie be a little bit more aggressive, but I think I was a lot more content by the end of the draft. I think when I looked big picture, and I think weirdly what we did in like round 6, I really liked, and that's a strange thing to say. I've probably never said that before. It's very rarely is the sort of round that you look at that sort of saves the day. But I liked the shot in the dark, shall we say, they took. But big picture, I've said this for years now, Shad. I can't remember what draft it was, but a few years ago, I felt like the Eagles just didn't value athleticism. We might be going back like 5-6 years now. And then ever since then, it just feels like the Eagles draft really good athletes, and they definitely look at the consensus board. There's a reason why every draft grade website has them like top 10, top 5 the past 3 years, because they always draft at the consensus board. I think whether that's they actually look at it or whether Howie's just incredibly plugged in and what other GMs are looking for around the league, I'm never really sure. But it feels like they just take really good athletes who fall below where they should fall. And I feel like sometimes you can overcomplicate this thing. And if you do that, and you find someone that fits your scheme, it's hard to go wrong, because when you draft very good athletes and you draft players that a lot of people online, we're not talking like random people online, like good quality scouts who work for big organizations. I think it's hard to have a terrible draft class. And either way, I think it's hard to hate the process. I think the process feels very strong with the Eagles. You never know how these players will turn out. But I don't look at the draft class and struggle to see the vision. I think the process is pretty clear. To see for all, which is when it comes to the draft, is the most important thing. I think you want to see like synced up thinking between coaches and the exec, and it looks like they have a plan for some of the players they lost in replacing them in the draft. There's a few things we can nitpick when we get into it. Of course, there are players that I would have liked myself that we didn't take, etc., etc. But overall, big picture, it's hard to come away feeling too annoyed, even if there's a few sort of minor decisions we can discuss. But yeah.
All right. Yeah, Jonny, you mentioned the process in the draft a few times there, and I just want to caution you against using the phrase "trust the process" on this podcast. So you got to be careful with that one. But other than that, let's dive in. So in the first round, they trade up from 32 to 31. It cost them I think it was 164 to take linebacker Jahad Campbell out of Alabama. He is 6'2" and 7/8 inches tall, 235 pounds, ran a 4.52 40, 9.87 relative athletic score. He's 21 years old. Now, Howie talked about, he kind of alluded to him as an edge rusher. And so we've got a comment already coming in here from Connor. And Devin, I'll throw it to you and let you answer this and talk about the player. But what do you think about him playing edge snaps? Howie talked about that a lot. It kind of sent Eagles Twitter down a rabbit hole there. And overall, what did you think of the player and the selection for the Eagles?
Yeah, I'll start with the edge rusher question. I think mainly because of his edge rushing background, he played edge rusher in high school at Timber Creek, local school in South Jersey. And he went to IMG Academy, also played edge rusher. And early in his Alabama career, he played edge rusher. So I could certainly see, situationally, they line him up or kind of present different looks across the line of scrimmage to kind of confuse defenses. But for him to just line up straight up as an edge rusher, I think it'll be more situation wise versus him doing an every down thing. I think he's a good, at least going to start at inside linebacker. And I think right now that's probably what he's most comfortable doing since he's been doing it more recently. But overall in the pick, honestly, it was kind of a surprise, on draft night, because it seemed like they weren't really in on Jahad Campbell just because, I think we gotten used to seeing the Eagles pick guys that had pre-draft visits to Philly and them kind of sticking with that motto and that plan. And with him having no reporter visit, you really didn't know or wasn't able really to gauge the interest. And I really don't think there was any noise around him, meeting with the Eagles during the combine as well. So I think the initial, reaction for me at least was a little bit surprised, but then you think a little bit more about it. It made a little bit more sense the more that you thought about it. Eagles always are valuing versatile players, especially on defense. You want a guy that obviously can play the inside linebacker position, but also bring you some pass rush use, a guy that can move around a little bit. He was able to guard tight ends one-on-one in coverage. I mean, there's so many things in his skill set that, made it such an alluring pick. The more that you thought about it, the more that it just made sense. And all the connecting the dots, the Eagles have really been more in taking local players and, going after local players in recent years, whether it's via trade or through the draft. And it made a lot of sense at the end of the night versus when you began the night, when you had like Donovan Ezraku still on the board and, Josh Simmons you want to pick later. Maybe the Eagles would have went off at the tackle, So I think when you think about the entire process and just the potential usage that he could have in Vic Fangio's defense, I think it made a lot of sense to have a player like Jahad Campbell that, we'll see if he'll be ready for week one. He had shoulder surgery and, it seemed like all things are pointing towards him being ready for the start of the season. But I think overall, just a really good player that I really liked throughout the process. I got to watch him in person, Wisconsin versus Alabama last fall. And you could see from even then on, before he really burst on the scene, that he was diagnosing plays. He was in the backfield consistently. He was being a force as a blitzing pass rusher. He was all over the field, consistently making plays. So it's been really cool to kind of see his ascension and him returning back home. I think that's such a great local story as well, with him being from South Jersey. But overall, I think it was just with who was on the board and who went off the board earlier in the first round, I think that he was probably one of the better options that you could have at 31 overall, and his potential future and usage in Vic Fangio's defense.
Yeah, you mentioned his versatility, and one of the things I wrote in my scouting report for him is that he's versatile in the right way, because a lot of times we talk about guys being versatile and it's like they can sort of do this and they can sort of do that, but they're not really great at anything. And they're a tweener that you put a lot of different places, and those guys can be hard to incorporate. And it takes like the perfect fit for them to thrive. And that can happen. But with Campbell, I feel like, you can use him as a blitzer. You can use him up on the line to bail out in some pressure situations. I also think you can just stick him at off-ball linebacker and expect him to thrive. I don't expect him to just be an edge rusher. I was kind of pushing back against that on Twitter as like how he can tell himself whatever he needs to justify taking a linebacker in the first round. I'm here for him as he works through that process. It's been a rough year for Howie. You know, he's paying a linebacker, he's paying a running back. It's a weird time for Howie Roseman, but I do think his versatile skill set, it gives him an easy on-ramp to being an impactful player, especially in a scheme like the Eagles run with Vic Fangio, and especially having a running mate in Zach Bond that has a lot of those similar skill sets, I think. So, yeah, I'm with you. I really liked the pick. I mean, he was the guy that I wanted, given how the board fell when the Eagles came up on the clock. And so I was pretty pleased with that one. I think he's an easy plug-and-play fit for the Eagles. Jonny, what were your thoughts on the Campbell pick and his fit?
Yeah, I think you guys covered it well. Devin summed up really well, actually, that you didn't think before the night it was going to be the pick. And then when the pick happened and you started reading into it, you were like, why did we not predict this more? Like, I literally wrote in my Bleeding Green article, I said Campbell would be a fantastic fit, but I doubt he will be there, and I doubt we'll draft another linebacker. And then in hindsight, I'm looking back at it and I'm thinking, I said he would be a great fit. He obviously fits the bill. I think maybe the top 30 thing spooked me. I think maybe I was too obsessed with how he's old, sort of the way he thinks about the linebacker position. But in hindsight, everything you read about him, I'm like, well, yeah, if the Kobe Dean's hurt, and I feel really bad for the Kobe Dean, but we don't really know if he's ever going to be able to play at the same level again. He's just a very, very reliable plug and play starter as long as the injury stuff holds up. Like, it's always boring to talk about the injury stuff because we don't really know. But I think he's just an exceptionally good footballer, and I think he's got the chance to be one of the best linebackers in the league. I think when you watch the way he flies around the field, I think that there's not many good linebackers in the league currently, and there's not many that are very, very versatile. I put this in the Bleeding Green summary as well. I said, to me, he's like the perfect modern-day linebacker. You don't want someone who's 250, 260 pounds, but the running game's back. You don't maybe want a 220 guy. I know Jeremiah Trotter was very light, and actually in the linebackers I watched this year, 235 is pretty decent size. Like, a lot of them are lighter. In fact, the one the Eagles took later on is 10 pounds lighter. So I think he fits the bill as your classic modern day linebacker. He can sort of do a bit of everything. I think the most exciting thing is just his fit in this defense. I can't really express enough how cool I think it is to watch him play next to Zach Bourne. I think he's an easy and obvious comparison to make. But yeah, I think the edge rusher thing is overblown. I think he'll be an off-ball linebacker. I'd be shocked if he's not. But of course, that means he will play edge because the Eagles are going to want to rotate their linebackers down to play edge because it messes with the offensive linemen's cadence and their calls and their checks. And I said it's many times, I think it was the cheat code that made the Eagles defense tick last year. And I think the worry was Zach Bourne was so important. You had nothing you could do if Bourne went down because no one else was capable of doing that. You can't just line up at edge. You have to actually know how to do it. You can't just stick the Kobe Dean at edge and say, can you set the edge against this really, really giant left tackle when you've never done it before? Like, there's a technique to it. There's a way of doing it. And he has legitimate experience doing it. We'll get into more of him, Shane, in later episodes when we go sort of really deep into the film. There are some things I've got about instincts and play recognition that I think he's still a little bit raw. I think offensive coordinators will target him a little bit early on, but I think he's got the kind of speed that can sort of cover up for any weaknesses. I think the thing about him is when he sees it and when he triggers and when he goes, he's so fast. Like, he is so fast. I think it's just a case of maybe how quickly he trusts his eyes early on and whether you see that speed actually translates to field from day one. But yeah, it's hard to hate the pick, isn't it? It seems like one of those picks that everyone, whenever you read any articles summarizing the Eagles draft pick, it always seems favorite pick, Jahad Campbell, because everyone seems to know that it's just a very, very good pick value-wise where they got him.
Yeah. A couple of comments here. Mark chiming in on YouTube says it's kind of like the Cooper DeJean pick last year. Versatile, athletic, can make an immediate impact. We also have Eagles Eric chiming in on Twitter that says Devin Jackson sounds like a great all-pro linebacker name. So maybe if the Jahad Campbell thing doesn't work out, we can try to get Devin up on the field here. But let's keep rolling on to the Eagles' second-round selection. They stuck and picked at pick 64 and took safety Andrew Makuba out of Texas. 5'11" and 2/8, 186 pounds, 9.3. 4 point. I don't know what that is. I must have mistyped. He had poor agility. He's a 5.11 relative athletic score, the worst relative athletic score the Eagles selected, largely due to the agilities and the size. 22 years old. Jonny, I'll throw this one over to you first. You said you've got to watch some Makuba.
Yep.
What were your overall thoughts on the Makuba selection?
Yes, I'm interested to see what you guys think, actually. I've been holding up some thoughts on Makuba for a while, and I watched him again today. And literally about 2 hours ago, I went back and watched a couple of games. I think the film is so good. And the more I watch, the more I like the film. Now, the good thing about the draft is we have to be like fair. So he was not my safety number one. I had Watts, Starks, Evan Worrying, Winston in the tier above him. And I still, in hindsight, I think it's easy to now say, of course, I'd love Makuba, but I also had Jonas Sanka right around there as well. It was a little bit higher than I expected, but I also said in my rankings that he was a second round player to me, and the Eagles took him at 64. And I said, I think he'd be a good fit. And I think I'll let Devin plug this, but I'm pretty sure he called Makuba in his final mock draft as well. So there was obviously a lot of buzz around that player, and it's so obvious to watch with the film. The film is just obvious. He is an unbelievably good fit in Fangio's defense. He's a clear split safety, quarters coverage, play downhill, versatile, cover the slot, can blitz, can cover deep. He's so instinctive in zone coverage. Like, some of his plays in zone coverage are, I think, the best in the class. And I really did like Watts, but I think some of the play he has as a deep safety, I just basically, my real thing, and it's such a boring take, and it's not just the height. I see people say he's a little bit undersized. He's undersized. Like, let's be real. He is light. And it's not just that he's light, it's the way he plays that he's light. If he was light and he was a very strong, like, solid wrap-up tackler, people sort of ran him over, but he got them down one way or another. He's out there, like, flying around, like, knocking dudes down, like, hard. And I'm watching this thinking, can he actually do this? And the Eagles obviously think he can, or they hope he can. But I don't know, and I hope I'm wrong, because I love the way he plays. But it's a little bit Sidney Brown-esque in that the way he plays is so fun to watch, but then you sort of wish you just calm down a little bit. Like, in the games I watched him just, like, rock two receivers on jet sweeps. I mean, just come down and absolutely light them up. And I'm like, it's not the case he's small. He's small. He's also got very small arms. And he's also had injuries history, including, I've got it in front of me here from my report, including like a dislocated elbow and stuff. And you think, small arms, injury history, and he hits so hard. So in summary, Shane, the more I watch him, the more I think the film is, like, outstanding. I think the film is so good. I think if he was 206 pounds, 210 pounds, he'd sneak into the back end of the first round. For me, it's not just the fact he's small, it's the way he plays and the fact he's small. And I'm really interested to just see if he can hold up at that size. That's really it for me. Devin, what did you think? You obviously weren't surprised at pick 64, because I'll give you a little shout out. I know you called it. But what did you think overall about, like, the way he plays? And are you as concerned about the size as I am?
Yeah, I think when you're playing safety and you're sub 200 pounds, I think you have to be concerned, just because it's such a physical league. It's such a physical position to play. If you're going to ask him to come down in inside boxes and stop the running game, which he did a pretty good job of his senior year at Texas, you have to be concerned about it. But I think, you're betting on the player to not only be healthy, but make a similar type of impact. And it's been cool to kind of watch his own journey, because he was a guy that was a nickel at Clemson and playing in the slots. And he's kind of used to that physicality and playing in tight quarters and, having to come up and set the edge as a run defender. So I think that really helped him in his transition to safety at Texas. But overall, I really like the player. I like specifically his route recognition and being able to drop back into zone off of a play action fake. Because I feel like that's where you start to really see if a player has those type of instincts to be, kind of a ball hawk over the middle of the field, a guy that can play in the deeper zones. I think that's when you really start to see it on his film. I think it was a game against Kentucky where he was inside the box. They did a play action fake and they threw over across the middle. And he was able to get his hands on it. I think there was a similar play against Georgia in the SEC championship game where he did a similar type action and got an interception off of it. So the player is really instinctual, really physical despite his size. And sure, the agilities could be a little concerning, but when you see him play on his film, he's always there. He's always ahead of the play, making plays on the perimeter, making plays in pass coverage, and really he's everything that you're looking for in a safety that can play, in kind of that low hole position, or a guy that can play in deeper zones and keep everything in front of him. I think he did a little bit of both at Texas. And then right now, I think, while he can do both things, I think he's a little bit better working towards the line of scrimmage and working in that 10 to 15-yard area. But I think he can take on the responsibility of playing that deeper coverage as well. But overall, I really like the player. I like what he brings to the table. His story is amazing too. I think his family moved from Zimbabwe when he was younger and came to the States. Grew up in the Austin area and just such a great player with a great story. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does in Philly, and I think he's going to have a really good chance to start next season, with that battle with Sidney Brown.
Yeah, he transferred from Clemson, and when he was at Clemson, he played a lot in the slot. He played a lot more safety, true safety for Texas, and I think that's his best usage. It's obviously how the Eagles are going to want to use him, which lines up well, but you can see, his ball production just multiplied in 2024. He had 1 interception over 3 years at Clemson. He had 5 at Texas. He had 6 pass breakups versus 11 the 3 years prior. I think he's got a lot of natural coverage instincts. He's a really good ball tracker. Mark in the YouTube comments here brought up Xavier Watts. Said interested to see how they compare in year one. I loved Xavier Watts. I liked Xavier Watts a lot more than Makuba. That said, Xavier Watts is a guy you want around the line of scrimmage a lot more, and that's just not traditionally how the Eagles are, that's not how Fangio is going to play his defense a lot. So I understand why Makuba was the guy that they went after. And he followed up also asking about if we think Reed Blankenship will switch roles and play more in the box now. If they're going to do that, if they're going to go into single high looks, I would assume Reed would be the guy dropping down more frequently, but they really didn't do that a ton last year. They really played a lot of middle field open type coverages. So I think you're going to see a lot of the same split safety looks with Makuba playing, quarters techniques from safety. And I think that's what you're going to see a lot from him, assuming he wins that job from Sidney Brown, which I would be willing to take that bet if somebody offered it. I think the Eagles health, as long as they're healthy, I think they probably drafted a starter with each of their first 2 picks. So, okay, let's go on to day 3 because the Eagles trade out of the 3rd round. At pick 111 in the 4th round, they take interior defensive lineman Ty Robinson out of Nebraska. He is 6'5" and 1/8, 288 pounds, ran a 4.83 40, overall has a 9.89 relative athletic score. He is an older prospect at 23 years old, will turn 24 during his rookie season. But Devin, I'll throw it to you first with Robinson. This isn't a guy, Jonny mentioned he hadn't watched him pre-draft. I had not either, so I was scrambling after that pick, trying to find stuff to watch on him. And I'm sure you had probably heard of him before in a way that maybe I hadn't. But what were your initial thoughts on the Robinson pick, and how do you think he fits in with the Eagles?
Yeah, that was the pick again was a bit of a surprise just because you really don't know. Especially I feel like on day 3 is kind of harder to gauge what players that the Eagles are interested in, just because you can kind of get a beat on the first couple rounds and know all right, this guy's going to go in this range. But Ty Robinson, man, I wrote as soon as he got drafted, he's a bull in the china shop. He's just a very physical player, wants to be physical, wants to use power, but he's also surprisingly nimble for his size, and obviously has the athleticism, agility, quickness. And you saw that at the combine. He was a guy to me that, I feel like kind of got lost in this class a little bit because he knew that the interior defensive line class was going to be really good. And it was really good at the top, and it was obvious by the run at defensive line that you saw through the first 2 days of the draft. So, but Ty Robinson, he's a player that played multiple alignments at Nebraska. Played some shade technique over the center, played some true defensive end snaps as well, and 4-eye and 5 techniques. And played the traditional 3 technique as well as interior defensive line. I think his best position is in the interior defensive line, playing a 3 tech, just because I feel like you can use his speed against guards and use some of that power to push back all interior offensive linemen. I also think he has some potential to play that defensive end role on rundowns, because he's a really solid run defender, a guy that can knife through defenses, use his quickness to split gaps, a guy that just has some really powerful hands and just can really hold the opponent attack really well. I think he could be a little bit better in terms of holding his own against double teams. I think he wasn't as strong in that area, but in terms of a one gapping player, I think he makes a lot of sense to kind of supplement what the Eagles have on the interior defensive line. I think he's probably going to play more of a rotational role. I would be surprised if he earned a starter role or comparable role early on, just because I feel like he can play with a little bit more pad leverage, can be a little bit more consistent on a down-and-down basis, but you can't deny some of the high flashes that he gives, the pass rush juice he gives as well. And I can see him be more of a rotational player in the Eagles defense.
Yeah, I think he could be really interesting too, as just a guy that you can run some pass rush games with Jalen Carter, because we know, I think a lot of people broke down in the Rams game how Jalen Carter was sort of freestyling, calling some twists and things on his own that led to some big plays late in the game. And that's something that Robinson's really well suited to, really good lateral agility, quick get off and things like that. So be interested to see what they can do with him in that regard to help free up Jalen Carter as well. Jonny, you said you did get to Ty Robinson. Anything that you want to add in on Robinson and the fit with the Eagles?
Yeah, I got to briefly to Robinson. I actually got someone to the later rounds more. I'd also just like to have a little humble brag that when Devin mentioned earlier on that he was lucky enough to see Jahar Campbell in the flesh, I was thinking, that's cool. What a job. But I realized that I, of course, went to Ohio State, Nebraska last year, Shane. And it turns out that Ty Robinson was indeed on the field. I think I was a few too many drinks in to give you a scouting report from the game itself. But the Eagles did draft someone that I saw. So there you go. I only just realized now.
Shout out you.
Yeah, but no takes from that day at all. I didn't even realize how good Ohio State were when I was there until suddenly I look at all these players getting drafted. The only thing I was looking at was how bad Jack Sawyer was. And because I thought he was really, really, really good, but he turned out to not be as good. And I think the NFL saw the same thing. But anyway, the weird thing about Ty Robinson, and I've never really understood why, and I think it's the fit in Nebraska, is that he's less than 290, or he's around 288, 290 pounds. Yet he played a little bit of everywhere. Like he played one technique, he played some nose tackle, he's played 4-eye, he's played free technique. Like he's a really versatile guy. So his film's a bit weird because, like Devin said, there are times when I think he's too weak and he gets moved. And I have a little very simple phrase, I don't want to see you on the ground. And I see him on the ground too much. But then sometimes I see him at the ground where he's getting double team playing one technique. And I'm like, that's not how the Eagles are going to use you. It's funny where sometimes we just assume that because someone did in college, that's why you've drafted them. Like I highly doubt he plays inside for the Eagles. I imagine he'll be a free technique 4-eye. And as you said, he could even play a little bit of edge. He could play some 5 technique. Because you look at his size, I think he's got that ability to do that. So I think he's one of those like versatile, high floor. He's 24 years old, which is a bit disappointing. I don't think it's like a swing for the fences pick. I did watch Howie speak about his like general draft philosophy the other day, and he mentioned that they're not interested in taking backups. Their sort of idea is they want talent all throughout. And the thing I'd say about Ty Robinson is I'm not sure I see that. I think shorter arms, 24 years old. I think maybe this is who he is. I think he should become a very good rotational option who can play multiple spots. But then, I'll be honest, I didn't see the athleticism that he tested with on film. So the athletic testing makes you think, well, maybe he's not hit his peak potential. Maybe there is something there. And I get the feeling that that might be the thing that convinced the Eagles because he looked to me like a high effort guy, like good pass rush moves, good against the run, one of those like high floor, coaches love him type players. But then he tested like a really good athlete, a better athlete than I saw on film at the combine. So maybe there's something else there and he will develop a little bit further. But I think whatever happens, you get a versatile piece that the Eagles needed. They need someone to play some snaps from Milton Williams next year. And I think the good thing about him being 24 or will turn 24 this year is that he can basically step in. And I think he's pretty much ready to go. So I don't dislike the pick. I was a bit surprised when it happened, mainly because I hadn't watched him and I'd watched other guys on my board. But the more I got to him, the more I could see the vision and I could see the fit. It's not the high upside swing, in my opinion, but maybe the athleticism means that he has a little bit more juice than I saw on tape. But I think the slightly shorter arms and lack of balance at times means he might struggle to be a full-time player.
All right. That is Ty Robinson. Let's keep rolling here. We got 3 5th-round picks and 3 6th-round picks. So in classic On the Shane page form, we're through a third of the draft class and we're 35 minutes in, but
yeah,
we'll see where we end up.
We can speed up some of them. I doubt we need to talk for 10 minutes about Mondon Jr. from Georgia or whatever, but yeah, we'll get through them.
All right. Well, at pick 145, the Eagles selected cornerback Mac McWilliams, which is a lot of Macs in one name, but Mac McWilliams out of UCF. He is 5'10 and 2/8, 191 pounds, ran a 4.41 40. 7.38 relative athletic score. So that's the second worst RAS score of anybody they drafted. Everybody else was in the 9s or didn't test enough to get one. He's 23 years old. Out of UCF, played a lot of zone coverage in college. That's definitely his strength. He's an undersized guy, and I think that shows up at the catch point for him and in the run game a little bit. But I put down my fit for him as a developmental slot defender / he's going to be able to give you special teams reps. He had some good special teams play at UCF, particularly on like kick coverage. But Devin, as you look at Mac McWilliams, what do you see for him and his role with the Eagles?
Yeah, I think I agree with you in the role in that I think he's probably going to play more nickel for the Eagles and be more of a depth piece for them. I thought he was really good in trying to he's really good in play recognition and route recognition. In terms of finishing, I think he leaves a little bit more to be desired, because at times you see him be able to get his hands on footballs, but other times he kind of gets lost when the ball is in the air and his back is turned. So I don't think he has the greatest man coverage instincts, but in terms of playing zone coverage, keeping things in front of him, making tackles when there are tackles to be had, and being able to close on the football. I think he brings all those things to the table. And I think he's a player that you want in your, secondary room as kind of a versatile guy. He played outside corner and nickel for UCF. So if you really need one in a pinch, he can play on the outside. But I think his best position is in the nickel and keeping things in front of him. I think he's a sound tackler on the perimeter. But you do worry a little bit about him being in those man coverage situations. I think that's where he can get beat a little bit. And I thought he had solid recovery speed, but I thought I had a little question about his long speed in terms of being able to recover down the field. I think he got, in trail position too often at times as well in those man coverage situations. So I think he's a guy that's like you said, developmental option, playing a nickel, and probably more of a depth piece, and a guy that kind of carves a role out in special teams.
Yeah, he especially, I thought, gives up too much separation coming out of breaks when he's pressed vertically with speeds. Like when he's threatened vertically and then it breaks off, he wasn't able to get through those breaks quickly enough. So, developmental piece. Mark's chiming in here, says maybe he's the new Avonte Maddox. Maybe so. Avonte Maddox is gone, so they could definitely afford to take a swing at slot here. Jonny, have you gotten to McWilliams yet?
Yeah, not massively. I was going to say exactly what Mark said, so thanks for stealing my thunder, Mark, in the comments. Yeah, to me, it's like a Maddox piece. The weird thing about this draft class, Shane, is by the end of the 5th round, I was like, I'm not really loving this, and I just prefer the juice in the 6th round more. If you swapped Mac McWilliams and the other two guys we're going to talk about with Miles Hinton, Cameron Williams, and Power Island, I'd feel a lot better on draft day. I'm fine with this. I don't know if they've said much about where they're going to play him, but his arm length is so short. I know his arm length changes from the combine to the pro day, which is always good fun, but around 30 and 5'10", 200 pound. He actually went up from 191 to 200 at his pro day as well. So whether he had to put on some weight because he was worried about seeing too light, that might not be a strong 200 either, because he got his weight up 10 pounds, but didn't do any testing. So I have a feeling he's more like a 190 guy. So I would, I see him as a nickel. I do see him as the Maddox backup, but I think you develop him special teams. And the Eagles do need a backup nickel corner, but I don't see him competing for reps on the outside.
Yeah, there's two ways you can go when you're in that situation. You can show up to the combine heavy and then run at your pro day, or you can run at the combine and then gain 10 to 12 pounds before the pro day. So it only goes one of two ways. You never test it both. Let's keep rolling on to the Eagles. Took a second linebacker, Smile Mondon out of Georgia, at pick 161. He is 6'2 and 2/8, 224 pounds, ran a 4.58 40, 9.38 relative athletic score. He is 22 years old. this was a guy that I really liked. I gave him a 3rd round grade. They got him in the 5th round, and I called him a developmental will / coverage linebacker that would be more of a sub package player and special teamer. Because he's small, but he's fast, and surprisingly at his size, he's actually a good tackler. And you don't see that a lot of times with those smaller guys. Has 425 plus special team snaps in his college career. He does have a lengthy injury history. He's missed time in high school with a knee injury. He's missed time in college nearly every season with ankle or foot injuries, some of which required surgeries. And so massive medical red flag for him, but he is a fun athlete to watch. And at a bare minimum, if healthy, he should be able to help you out on special teams. Jonny, what are your thoughts on Munden?
Yeah, I watched him pre-draft as well. I wasn't as high. I had him as a round 4 guy, but I said that. So I'm bringing up my notes. I liked his speed. I liked his athleticism. I think he's one of those like guys you notice on film because there's a few reps every game that pops. I don't watch special teams, I'm not going to lie, but I know he's played a lot of special teams, which is always good. But I've not got time to watch special teams. I didn't see a starter. I saw him as like one of those like fun backups. You don't mind if he comes in every so often because he wants to hit people and flies around, like good in pursuit, quite versatile. I think I saw some coverage reps that surprised me a little bit that I quite liked. His problem was injury history, size massively at 224 is light. So I said he would fit with Eagles as a rotational linebacker and special teams contributor. I said Fangio would like his play in coverage, but he would need to develop his size and physicality to be able to hang on early downs. So he might give them some like obvious passing down situation like juice if anything was to ever happen to one of the starting linebackers. But yeah, I think special teams rotational piece. I think again on day 5, nothing wrong with that at all. Devin, similar thoughts?
Yeah, I thought, when I heard the pick, he's probably more of a special teams guy, considering what they've taken the last few years and what they have on the roster. And I think with him, the injury history is probably a little concerning, considering what the Eagles have on the roster now and the Kobe Dean and some of the injury history that he has. But Mondon, I think is a guy that I could see as as Shane said, as a will linebacker. In the Eagles system and a guy that can bring you some coverage snaps and be a little bit more versatile type and play well off of a true Mike linebacker. So I think Munden overall is a player that I like as a special teams player, and assuming that he can stay healthy, he can find a role in that way. But for him, it's going to be a challenge, because of what they have at linebacker now. With Zach Bond, Jahad Campbell, obviously Jeremiah Trotter coming back from last year, and Trotter played a lot of special team snaps. So this one's going to be a tough one for him to try and make the final roster. But I really like the player and like taking the swing. He's a really athletic player that can move sideline to sideline and bring some more depth in that linebacker room.
Yeah. Got another comment chiming in saying he can hopefully take some of Zach Bond's spots on special teams. He was playing there a good bit, if I remember correctly. Bond had like 77 special team snaps throughout the season. And you would definitely love to see your star linebacker not be taking 77 snaps on special teams. Although, to be fair, he wasn't a star linebacker when the season started. So, maybe they can get him off of that and put Munden or somebody else, Trotter, or somebody in there in that situation. So the final 5th round pick at pick 168, the Eagles took interior offensive lineman. He pretty much only played center at Boston College, but they introduced him as a center guard. Drew Kindle, he's 6'4" and 2/8, 308 pounds, has a 9.2 relative athletic score if you run it as a center. It changes a little bit at guard, but he's 23 years old. I didn't watch him at all. I still haven't looked into him. He's not a guy I've had time to make it to. So, Devin, I'll throw it over to you first. What are your thoughts on Kindle?
Yeah, he's a guy that doesn't really stand out too much athletically, but he's a guy that's just always in the right spot, climbing to the second level on combo blocks, and a guy that can handle some of the pass protection duties and pointing out some potential blitzers. So I think overall he's a really smart center, a guy that is durable, dependable. Went first team all ACC this past season at Boston College, and played on an offensive line that produced a couple different draft picks. So I think he's a guy that is probably more of a backup, maybe competing for that backup center job, behind Cam Jurgens, and a guy that I think is just rock solid. A rock solid player, doesn't do anything flashy, doesn't do anything particularly, elite. But I think he's a guy that's just a solid player. I thought he got overwhelmed a little bit with power at the college level, and he doesn't necessarily have the foot quickness to work out in space. But I think he's a really solid player overall that can compete for a backup spot, and for the Eagles, they definitely need a backup center after Landon Dickerson having to take that on with Cam Jurgens being a little banged up in the playoffs. So I like Kendall as a backup player, guy that can bring some depth at that center spot.
All right, Jonny, anything you would like to add in on Kendall?
Yeah, not watched. Just big picture. I think centers, there are so few coming out of college now. I think Drew Kendall on some guys was like center 3 to center 4. The second I read his report, it looked like a classic Eagles backup center. Like, I can see why they wanted him. Like, I'm pretty sure he only ever played center in college. There's no versatility there. But you know what? With center, I don't care about versatility. Get me someone that knows how to snap the ball, knows how to play. If you have to use him, you can survive for a game or two. So I expect he's got a good chance of being the backup, because I think they'll want him on the roster. And everything I see is like, he's played center for a long time. I think he's the son of an NFL offensive lineman, and I think it screams like classic safe backup pick. So makes a lot of sense. The more I read about him, the more I found myself going, yeah, I can absolutely see why the Eagles did it.
Yeah, he played 2,450 snaps at center in college and 0 snaps elsewhere. So
yeah, a true center. Yeah.
Yeah. But center guard, according to the Eagles. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Let's keep rolling into the 6th round. The Eagles also made a trio of picks in the 6th round. They started off at pick 181 with quarterback Kyle McCord out of Syracuse. He is 6'3", 218 pounds, did not complete enough athletic testing for a relative athletic score, as nobody in the 6th round that they took did, but he's 22 years old. He's a guy that when you watch him play, he just seems like sound, like mechanically sound, like he thrives from a clean pocket, playing on time with like accuracy. He does have a nice deep ball, really good connection downfield on deep passes. I don't know if either of you like follow an NFL team that likes to throw the ball deep downfield outside the numbers, but not very athletic. He really can kind of fall apart when he's under pressure, puts the ball in danger a lot. He's kind of like your classic, like West Coasty type quarterback that can also push the ball vertically. The QB factory rolls on, and we'll see. I would imagine that he will probably beat out DTR for QB3 because, to be honest, DTR is just pretty bad at football, but exciting to run around, watch run around. Jonny, thoughts on Kyle McCord?
Yeah, not watched him. This is why we brought on Devin, just to help us out a little bit with some of the players that we haven't got around to yet. I've read a lot of scouting reports. I've watched a few videos of him, like scouting reports on YouTube and stuff. And I just find philosophically it really interesting that the Eagles do not care about having mobility at quarterback. I find it really interesting that their quarterback is a guy who's such a big part of their run game, and then you've now got Tanner McKee, and I think he'll beat out DTR because I watched a bit of DTR for Bleeding Green last year, and I think I might beat out DTR as well without being too rude. So I'm not sure. I think Carl McCord.
Can you run QB counter bash, Jonny?
That's all you. Well, do you know what? I joke, but that's basically what DTR is built in to do. That's just why I'd love to pick the brains of why the Eagles do it. You've got like DTR who can absolutely run the Eagles like running game. Like you see QB counter bash, you see the read option stuff. Then you end up with Kenny Pickett and McKee, who are like prototypical on time, like classic quarterbacks. And then they draft Kyle McCord. For everything I read somewhere that the reason why he left his previous college, despite being pretty good, was that the head coach, was it Ryan Day, openly came out and said they wanted more mobility. So he transferred to Syracuse. And I just find it really interesting that the Eagles have such different perspectives on their backup quarterbacks. They either seem to be really mobile, like DTR, Mariota, or completely immobile, like RPO stuff. And I think he looks like a classic QB3. I think he's got a chance of being a QB3. Maybe he can grow into a QB2, but I haven't really got to the film yet. But based on the scouting reports, I could already sort of predict what type of player I'm going to be looking at. Devin, any radical thoughts on Kyle McCord? It's always fun watching quarterbacks. I feel like you have to actually take time to watch him as well.
Yeah, Kyle McCord is such an interesting one. He's another local guy that the Eagles selected. Went to high school at St. Joseph's Prep in the Philly area and from the South Jersey area. So sticking on the theme of High Roseman, kind of bringing guys home and playing for the Eagles. Another surprising pick for me, again, you never know the Eagles coming into the draft want to select the quarterback. You never have that on your radar. And the ones that they do end up selecting are the ones that they're a little bit surprised about. With McCord, he's a guy that played with a lot more confidence this year as opposed to Ohio State. Played a little bit more freer. He talked about playing a little bit more free this year. And a guy that I kind of follow just because the South Jersey connections on Syracuse is quite a few, including the head coach, Fran Brown. So with McCord, a player that's smart, makes good decisions, generally speaking. I know he could put the ball in harm's way, but he played a little bit more of a gunslinger type of mentality this past year at Syracuse. Ran a lot of RPOs, like a ton of RPOs. And that was a big basis of their offense at Syracuse, playing under Jeff Nixon, a former NFL offensive coordinator. And a guy that just gets the ball out quick, tries to be more of a distributor, a guy that can test you vertically. I don't think he has the strongest arm. I think he has probably slightly above average arm, but can make all the throws, has the confidence to make all the throws, and a guy that's a rhythm passer. I think he's at his best when, like Shane talked about, there's a clean pocket. There's good timing between him and his receivers. And he's not really a guy that's going to make a ton of plays outside of structure, pretty much in between the lines type of player. Tries to beat you with his mind and his accuracy. And I think he just made a big jump this year in this long year at Syracuse, and a player that has a chance throughout his career to compete for a backup spot. But at least with the Eagles, I think he's going to be battling for that QB3 spot.
All right. And I misspoke a moment ago. The Eagles made 4 6th-round selections, not 3. So we've got 3 guys left here, a pair of offensive linemen and a defensive lineman. So at pick 191, the Eagles take offensive tackle Miles Hinton out of Michigan, 6'6" and 6'8", 328 pounds, no relative athletic score, 23 years old. Devin, what are your thoughts on Hinton?
Yeah, Hinton was a solid player along the Michigan offensive line, massive player, has all the measurables that you were looking for. And when you watch him play, he's a guy that plays upright, plays with a lot of power behind his hands. But you just worry a little bit about the pass protection. I thought he gave up a soft shoulder pretty often when he was dropping back into his pass sets. A guy that I think is probably going to be a developmental option for the Eagles. And a guy that I think could be a candidate to move to the interior, just because I don't think he has the necessary foot speed to stay out at tackle. But you do like that he has the left tackle and right tackle experience. He started his career at Stanford and played right tackle there. Played the last couple of years at left tackle from Michigan. And a player that's just a solid player, a guy that can climb to the second level in the running game and has some pretty good pop behind his hands, but I do worry a little bit about his pad level 1, and then 2. I think his footwork needs to be cleaned up, and his foot speed isn't the greatest. So I think he's a guy that's going to have a chance to maybe compete for that swing tackle spot, but I wouldn't be surprised if ultimately he moves to the interior, just because I think that's where his skill set is best suited at.
All right. Jonny, what are your thoughts on the Hinton selection?
Yeah, I've not watched Hinton. I think the biggest thought I'd give is from what I saw, and when I say not watched, I've watched the classic YouTube highlights, but not properly looked at him. He looked pretty strong, and he is massive. So the Eagles obviously had some success with Becton. Maybe they go back to this huge guy at guard. They played a lot of former tackles at guard of late, obviously in Steen and Becton. The thing that I find just absolutely fascinating, Shane, is we're going to talk about the next guy soon, is just how much better from what I've seen Cameron Williams is, and the fact the Eagles took him 16 picks later. I'd have been pretty furious if someone had taken Cameron Williams after the Eagles had taken Hinton, but then the Eagles went and got both of them anyway. So I know we're going to talk about him in a second, but I was such a big fan of Cameron Williams' films. I was sort of shocked when they took another tackle in the 6th round that wasn't Williams. And then it was quite funny, but they came back and got him. So, yeah, I'm happy to rock straight onto Cameron Williams because I think from what I tweeted you, Devin, you're quite similar to me as well. So give me the intro, Shane. Let me talk about Cameron Williams.
Yeah, the pick that saved day 3 for me. I loved Cameron Williams. I had a 3rd round grade on him. He is 6'5" and 6'8", offensive tackle out of Texas, 6'5" and 6'8", 317 pounds, 21 years old. I won't read my whole scouting report on him here, but Jonny, I'll throw it to you because you seem like you're chomping at the bit to talk Cameron Williams. So
yeah, I just couldn't believe he was there. I don't know what I missed. So I had, like, in my round 3 tier, I had Charles Grant. That was like everyone's Eagles darling. Every single mock draft, round 3, round 4, Charles Grant. And Cameron Williams was just sitting there, and he was in the exact same tier for me. He was 1 pick below Charles Grant. And I had him above guys like Belton, Ozzie Trapillo, who went way before Cameron Williams. And I was sitting there thinking, like, what am I missing? I had him like neck and neck with Charles Grant, honestly. And you could have pushed, if I had to choose, they were really, really close. I know he's very young. I know he came out too early and there's issues with balance, issues with penalties. I think he's seriously raw, but I had him in the 3rd round and my exact comments were just like, ideal physical length, ideal power, really, really strong grip, really good at the point of attack, incredibly good physical traits. Like when he moves guys, he dominates them. And then my final comment, and this is pre-draft, not post-draft, was just a super athletic lineman with physical traits that badly need coaching. That sounds like Jeff Stoutland's music. I said, I just wish we had the testing numbers, but he was injured and he could easily compete or develop as a tackle. I like this a lot in the Eagles in the 3rd round. So I guess the lack of testing numbers and the injury pushed him down, but I didn't see a 6th round tackle. And obviously when someone gets drafted in the 6th, you then go back and check your notes and you think, well, what does everyone else have him at? And I checked Dane Brugler, and Brugler had him in the 4th. So, like, still not the 6th. I checked Bleacher Report, which I always look because they have I've gone blank on his name now.
Brandon Thorne.
Yes, Brandon Thorne, who writes for the Bleacher Reports. And he has him as his tackle 7 and potential starter in the 3rd round. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, so what have I missed? Maybe it was to do with injury history. Maybe it was to do with the rawness. And then I keep going on podcasts and people saying he might have been like a projected 1st round pick next year if he stayed in college. And I'm thinking, how did the Eagles get him in the 6th round? But Devin, am I crazy? I think we spoke and you liked him as well. So I guess you were similarly surprised that he fell to where he did.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he'd be in play in 3rd or 4th round. You know, honestly, if you flipped him with any of the Eagles 3rd round, like 4th or 5th round picks, I mean, you're pretty ecstatic about it. My guess is probably he didn't interview well, would be my guess, you know, because I did talk to him at his combine podium, and he wasn't really a big talker about himself and what he brought to the table. So I could see something behind the scenes maybe didn't go exactly well for him, the reason that he fell. And sometimes that happens, you know, sometimes players go through the process and, you know, things kind of change from a projection standpoint, just because, you know, maybe the interviews didn't go as well. Maybe the workouts didn't go as well if they asked them to come in for a workout. So I would surmise it's one of those things that, you know, caused him to fall to the 6th round. But, you know, I was pretty ecstatic. I heard the name. I was like, wait, he's still on the board this late in the draft. So funny enough, I did 1 7-round mock the entire this entire draft cycle, and I put him in the 3rd round for the Eagles because it felt like it made sense as a developmental guy. Maybe he's a guy that you know, is gonna, you know, can be a heir to Lane Johnson. But yeah, I saw the physical tools, and obviously the lack of starting experience. He only started 16 games in college, and most of them came this past year for Texas. But a guy that moves surprisingly well for his size at 6'6", 317, really powerful with his hands. But like you said, he's a guy that's pretty rough around the edges in terms of player. He gives up a soft shoulder to edge rushers, struggles a little bit more against edge rushers as well. And so I think Cameron Williams overall is a really good player, a really good tools, but I think he's going to need to be refined a little bit. And he couldn't have landed in a better spot than with Jeff Stoutland. And I won't be surprised in a few years we talk about him as being a potential starter for the Eagles, because I think that highly of him. I think that highly of his skill set. And I really think this is one of my favorite picks of the draft. I mean, of all the teams, getting him and pairing him with the Eagles, the success that they've had with offensive linemen, and potentially getting a guy that could start for you down the road in the 6th round. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So I really like the Cam Williams pick, and I'm hoping that he develops and turns out to be the player that people think of him as, because for him being around this late in the draft was a bit of a surprise for sure.
Yeah, we talk about the rough edges that he has a little bit. And again, I really like the player. You guys covered the good stuff quite a bit, and I don't want to be redundant there, but he's really prone to penalties. He's pretty grabby. I think he had 16 penalties called on him this year, which is a ton for one season. And he really struggles to protect the edge against wider alignments. He doesn't get enough depth quickly enough in his slides. He's got poor strike timing and accuracy, and his footwork's not the best, and all those things can be fixable. This is not a guy that you want to play this year. I said that you could maybe kick him inside to guard and help protect against some of those footwork issues when you're leaving him on an island, and you sort of maximize his power moving forward in the run game. But overall, I said I think he can play offensive tackle in like a play action RPO type scheme that will protect him from true dropbacks. Or you could put him at guard, and it makes him a little more scheme diverse. And, the Eagles never seem to have a long-term solution at right guard, and they're going to need a long-term solution at right tackle in a few years. So I think he could potentially fill either of those for the Eagles down the road. So that was my favorite pick by far outside of the first round. So that is Cameron Williams. On to our last guy. It is edge rusher Antoine Powell-Ryland. The Eagles took him at pick 209, edge rusher out of Virginia Tech. He is 6'2" and 5/8, 258 pounds. Ran a 4.69 40-yard dash and 9.18 relative athletic score. He is also 23 years old. This is a very light, small player. Second percentile arm length at the edge rusher position. This feels like your classic, designated pass rusher type pick that we don't really trust in the run game at all. Devin, what were your thoughts on Antoine Powell-Ryland?
Yeah, he was a player, again, that I was a little bit surprised that he was there that late in the draft, but also a guy I think, overall that had major juice coming off the edge and was a force for Virginia Tech this past season. A guy that can quickly, force tackles to get out of their stance and can beat him around the edge, can beat him with a spin move, and a guy that has a really nice pass rush plan overall. You can go to quite a few different moves to beat offensive linemen and beat tackles as well. And a player that, like you said, the 31-inch arms are hard to get around, especially at edge. He's also a lighter player and a guy that just brings you that pass rush juice. If you're asking him to be kind of an early down run stopper, I think you're misusing what he can do. So I see a sub package player, a guy that can provide some depth in the edge rushing room, and a guy probably that won't get snaps this year and might take some time to truly develop and put some more weight on him as well. I think he's not at a playable weight right now, at least at the NFL level, and a guy that played some off-ball linebacker previously in his career, but I think he makes more sense as an edge rusher. But yeah, I like Powell-Ryland as a player that's more of a sub-package guy, DPR, and probably bottom of the depth chart type of player right now that can bring you some juice. But I think he's going to have to try and make a living on special teams to make the 53-man roster this year. I can see him being a practice squad player and stash and keep. And maybe, if you get banged up a little bit in your edge rushing room, he can bring some juice for you on the edge.
All right. Jonny, any thoughts on Powell-Ryland?
No, nothing that wasn't said. I was going to say exactly the same. I was going to say if he makes it, it will be because he's a pass rusher. And there's always room for pass rushers on teams. I think the Eagles really needed an undersized edge rusher, actually. I thought they might do it in the first round. I think Donovan... what's his name? Mizuraki was my pick in the end. And I thought when he was traded up, it was going to be for him because I think they needed someone that's a pass rushing specialist. And whether he makes the roster or not, we will see. But I think he's got natural leverage, natural bend. And I think he's got quite a lot of good pass rushing moves, even though he's not the biggest or not the best athlete. I think he does win and his numbers back that up with was it like 16 or something sacks or something ludicrous last year that he ended up with. I think the reason why he fell was the NFL teams don't believe that the way he wins is going to translate. Otherwise, he'd have gone a lot higher, considering he ended up, 16 sacks last year. You don't get many players that fall that late with 16 sacks. So we'll see. I was really interested in the Eagles adding a pass rush specialist because I think they've got enough guys that can hang on the edge on early downs. So maybe this is the guy. Maybe he has a chance of making it. And if he does, then he'll be an interesting one to track if he does manage to make the roster. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, between Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith, the Eagles have a type when it comes to edge rushers. They like those small guys for sure. So that is the Eagles draft class in a nutshell. And Jonny and I will dive into some more film stuff. You can definitely also go check out Devin's Twitter at @RealD_Jackson. And he's got a lot of stuff out for the Inquirer as well. So if you want to read some more of his thoughts or check out some of the clips he's posted, please go do that. Devin, thanks for joining us, man. Before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts on the draft class as a whole? Anything that you want to plug? Oh, you're on mute. That's classic. Jonny does that like 4 times a show. You're a true fit here now. If this was the interview, you just like got elevated around on our board because you left yourself on mute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall, when you look at this class, I think there are a lot of good players in there. I think some of the process on day 3, you probably question a little bit, in terms of where they got to these players and, where they ultimately ended up. But I really like they had a mix of guys that can be, immediate, contributors, and guys that can be developmental guys down the road. I feel like you have to have a good draft class. You have to have a little bit of both. Some guys projecting out, far out and wide, down a few years to really get the value you see. But I think on paper it's a class that I think will obviously be defined on what Campbell and Makuba do for the Eagles in the immediate future. But if a guy like Cam Williams hits in 2 or 3 years, I think that's a class to be a chance to be a pretty special class if they get 3 of those guys to be starters and high caliber players. So definitely interested to see. They definitely took a few gambles with guys that are a little bit banged up throughout college, but I think you can afford that if you're the Eagles coming off a Super Bowl and trying to keep that Super Bowl window open.
All right. Jonny, any final thoughts? Anything you want to plug? I know I saw you had an article on BGN about Campbell yesterday, I think.
Yes, I got the Campbell film review up. This is the fun time of the year when it takes me forever to write up every player. But it's probably like I prefer individual analysis. I've always liked player analysis. It's probably my favorite pieces to do. And I feel like I've had a pretty decent success rate predicting what's sort of like the way they're going to be used players of late. So I always like getting to the last bit. I think a lot of scouting reports are similar, but I'd really try and focus on how they fit in this defense. And I have quite a lot to say about Zach Ball and Campbell and how I think he'll fit. I think just big picture, I like the draft class. I don't love it. If you're doing the stupid grading, you give it like a B+. I think the thing for me that I was disappointed at was maybe the 5th round, just personal preference. I wanted to see a back or a receiver or like a hybrid who could do a little bit of both. I think maybe they lost a little bit of juice. I think when you go linebacker and safety, the first 2 picks, that means you're going to have to go a defensive tackle, offensive tackle somewhere in the later rounds. I think it was a little bit of a shame, but they couldn't draft maybe like an explosive slot option or an explosive backup running back. So I think the depth chart's a little bit light, but there's a long way to go. I think a lot of the draft class would also be decided by what happens with Dallas Goedert, because I think by no fault of their own, the ball they had no chance of getting a tight end basically unless they traded down from round 1. The ball just didn't fall that way. So I think if Goddard hangs around, I think when you look at the depth chart after Shane, it's a pretty damn strong depth chart. I think the question will be what happens with Goddard. And also they're going to be hoping that one of those young second-year receivers step up, because otherwise the receiver room looks a little bit light outside of a top 3. But yeah, thanks for joining, Devin. I knew you'd be awesome because I know you do a serious amount of work, and I will continue to plug your own clips in my Bidding Green stuff to save me from figuring out how to get them from YouTube myself, which is wicked.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I got frustrated with the trade backs. But at the end of the day, like, I like the draft class. It's solid. I do wish they would have taken a running back because a day 3 running back would have had a legit chance to make this roster, and there's just not going to be room for 3 offensive linemen. But, you know, if you throw 3 darts at offensive linemen and one of them hits and becomes a starter, that's still probably a win. So definitely not your typical draft going linebacker safety, but overall, I'm excited to see how the guys pan out. So anyways, that's going to do it for our initial draft recap. Like we said earlier, we'll be back doing some more film stuff. We're going to be doing some film watch-alongs for Patreon. So if anybody wants to join the Patreon, you can come support us at patreon.com/ontheshanepage. Get access to our Discord server, a whole bunch of other perks, exclusive video casts and things like that. Be sure you're following Devin at RealD_Jackson. Go check out all of his work. Devin, thanks for joining us. We'll definitely have to have you back sometime, and we will catch the rest of you guys next time. Go Birds.